Hi, I'm Ryan, and on my 24th birthday, my own brother tried to destroy my entire life with a single package. He didn't use a weapon. He used the mail, and he sent his poison right to my military base, hoping it would detonate my career and leave me with nothing. The one person who was supposed to have my back tried to stab me in it, right in front of the only family that ever respected me, the U.S. Army. Have you ever felt a betrayal so deep it completely changes how you see the world? Before I tell you what my commanding officer said the second he saw the sender's address on that box, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Believe me, you won't want to miss what happens when a so-called failure decides to fight back. The conflict between my older brother Ethan and me wasn't new. It was the foundation of our family. He was the golden child, the tech entrepreneur who made his first million before he was 30. He lived in a sprawling mansion in an exclusive Dallas suburb, drove a new BMW M Series every year, and measured success in stock options and quarterly earnings. I, on the other hand, was the disappointment. I chose a different path, one of service, discipline, and honor. I enlisted in the Army. To Ethan, and by extension our mother, this wasn't a noble choice. It was an admission of failure, proof that I couldn't cut it in the real world like he had. Every family gathering felt less like a reunion and more like a performance where he was the star, and I was the embarrassing stagehand. Our mother, Sharon, was completely captivated by Ethan's world. She lived vicariously through his success, basking in the glow of his wealth. She'd talk endlessly about his latest business trip to Dubai, the charity galas he attended, or the new wing he was adding to his house. When I would call home from the base, the conversation was always short. She'd ask if I was eating enough, then quickly steer the topic back to Ethan. His life was the family's main event. My life, with its grueling physical training, early mornings, and the immense pride I took in my uniform, was just a footnote. It was a quiet, constant dismissal that hurt more than any loud argument ever could. Her pride was reserved for the son who could buy her things, not the one who served his country. I'll never forget the Christmas before everything fell apart. We were all in Ethan's massive living room, which looked more like a hotel lobby than a home. He made a big show of handing our mother a small, elegant box. Inside was a vintage Rolex, its gold face shimmering under the light of the ridiculously oversized Christmas tree. She gasped, tears in her eyes, and hugged him like he'd just saved the world. A few minutes later, I gave her my gift, a custom-framed photo of our late father in his own Army uniform, something I had spent weeks restoring. She gave me a tight, polite smile, said, "Oh, that's nice, dear," and set it aside on a table where it was quickly buried under discarded wrapping paper. Ethan just smirked at me from across the room, a look that said, "See? You can't compete." That feeling of being invisible in my own family became a heavy weight I carried everywhere. Going home on leave started to feel like a punishment, not a reward. I'd sit at their polished mahogany dining table, listening to talk of market trends and investment portfolios, feeling like a foreigner who didn't speak the language. Ethan would make subtle digs, asking if my little Army salary was enough to buy a decent meal off base, or joking that my most valuable asset was my government-issued rifle. My mother would just laugh, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She never defended me. She was an accomplice in my humiliation, blinded by the shine of Ethan's success and the comfort it provided her. The cruelty wasn't just about the money, it was about power. Ethan needed to feel superior, and my life choice was a constant nagging reminder that there were other ways to define a man's worth. He couldn't stand it. So he made it his mission to devalue my path at every turn. He'd call my service playing soldier in the dirt, and referred to my squad mates as a bunch of high school dropouts with nowhere else to go. He didn't see the brotherhood, the sacrifice, or the unwavering commitment. He only saw what it wasn't. It wasn't rich, it wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't him. His arrogance was a shield for an insecurity so deep, I don't think even he understood it. His success wasn't enough. He also needed me to fail. What they never understood was that I chose the Army for a reason. I wasn't running from anything. I was running to something. I was seeking purpose, a sense of belonging that I never found in that cold, empty mansion. I found it in the pre-dawn runs, in the shared hardship of training, and in the quiet understanding between soldiers who would lay down their lives for one another without a second thought. That was a currency Ethan's money could never buy. My uniform wasn't a costume. It was my identity. It represented everything I valued: integrity, loyalty, and selflessness. It was everything his world of cutthroat business deals and superficial luxury was not. As my 24th birthday approached, I felt a familiar sense of dread. I was stationed at Fort Liberty in North Carolina, hundreds of miles away from Dallas, but I knew that distance wouldn't stop Ethan. He always had to make his mark, to send some gift that was really just a Trojan horse for an insult. One year it was a book titled How to Succeed in Life for Dummies. Another year it was a cheap plastic toy soldier with a note that said, "Here's a guy who gets paid about the same as you." I told my friends on the squad to just ignore anything that might show up from Texas. I was hoping he'd be too busy closing a deal or flying his private jet somewhere to bother with me this year. I should have known better. His need to put me down was more important than any business deal. My life on the base was my sanctuary. It was structured, predictable, and fair. You were judged by your actions, not your bank account. My commanding officer, a major who had seen 3 tours in Afghanistan, was a man I respected more than anyone. He was tough but just, and he saw potential in me. My squad was my family. We shared everything: meals, stories, fears. We built a bond forged in sweat and mutual respect. This was my world, a place where I was valued, where I belonged. It was the one place I thought Ethan's poison couldn't reach me. But I was wrong. He wasn't just going to send an insult this time. He was going to try and burn my entire sanctuary to the ground. The day it happened was my 24th birthday. During mail call, my sergeant tossed a medium-sized cardboard box onto my bunk. "Looks like someone loves you, Ryan," he joked. The guys in my squad started whistling and making comments about a secret admirer. I laughed along with them, but as soon as I saw the shipping label, a familiar coldness seeped into my gut. The return address wasn't a person's name. It was a sleek corporate logo for a company I'd never heard of, Apex Global Logistics, with a Dallas P.O. box. There was no handwritten note, no personal touch. It was sterile, anonymous, and that was Ethan's signature style. He loved making things feel like a business transaction, even his cruelty. I knew without a doubt that this gift was another one of his calculated insults, wrapped and shipped with malicious intent. I wanted to just throw it away, to pretend it never arrived. But my curiosity, mixed with a stupid, lingering hope that maybe this time would be different, got the better of me. I decided to take it to a small common room to open it, away from the prying eyes of my squad. I didn't want them to see the inevitable disappointment or hurt on my face. As I was walking down the hall, my commanding officer, Major Thompson, was coming the other way. He was a man who noticed everything, from a scuffed boot to a soldier's troubled expression. He gave me a nod. "Package from home, Ryan?" he asked, his tone friendly. "Something like that, sir," I replied, trying to sound casual. But he must have seen something in my face, because his eyes drifted down to the box in my hands, lingering on the shipping label for a second too long. The Major's friendly demeanor vanished in an instant. His posture straightened and his gaze sharpened, becoming analytical and cold. "Let me see that," he said, his voice dropping to a command tone that made you stand at attention without thinking. I handed him the box. He didn't even look at me. His focus was entirely on the label, his thumb tracing the corporate logo. "Apex Global Logistic," he read aloud, more to himself than to me. "I want you to put this package on the ground. Right now. Do not open it." The shift in the atmosphere was so sudden it felt like the air pressure had dropped. The normal sounds of the base, distant drills, soldiers shouting, seemed to fade into an unnerving silence. My heart started to pound a heavy, anxious rhythm against my ribs. "Sir, what's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He ignored my question and pulled out his service phone, turning his back to me slightly as he made the call. His words were clipped and precise, full of acronyms I barely understood. He mentioned the sender's name again, and then I heard a phrase that made the blood drain from my face. "Flagged on a federal watch list. Potential domestic threat." I just stood there, frozen. A federal watch list? A threat? This had to be a mistake. It was just a stupid, mean-spirited birthday gift from my brother. But the look on the Major's face told me this was far beyond a simple prank. Ethan hadn't just sent me an insult. He had attached a tripwire to it, designed to create the maximum possible damage in my world, a world he knew nothing about. Within 5 minutes, 2 military police officers arrived. Their presence was like a physical blow, sucking all the air out of the hallway. They didn't speak to me. They spoke to the major in low, serious tones, their eyes flicking over to me, then to the box, then back to me. I felt like a bug under a microscope. One of my squad mates, Dave, poked his head out of his room, saw the MPs and quickly ducked back inside. The news would spread through the barracks like wildfire. Ryan, the quiet guy from Texas, was in trouble. Real trouble. The shame was suffocating. I had worked so hard to build a reputation here, to be seen as reliable, honorable, a good soldier. And with one package, Ethan was tearing it all down, making me look like a criminal in front of the only family that had ever truly accepted me. I was escorted to a small, sterile briefing room and told to wait. An MP stood guard outside the door, his shadow visible in the crack of light underneath. The minutes crawled by, each one filled with 1,000 panicked thoughts. My mind replayed every resentful conversation, every condescending smirk from Ethan. I tried to imagine what could be in that box. Was it illegal? Dangerous? Had he set me up so perfectly that I'd be unable to prove my innocence? The very foundation of my life, my career, my honor, my future, was cracking under the weight of his jealousy. He wasn't just trying to humiliate me anymore. This was a deliberate attempt to get me kicked out of the army, to strip me of my uniform and send me crawling back to Dallas. A failure, just as he always said I was. Eventually, Major Thompson came in, followed by a stern-faced man in civilian clothes who introduced himself as a CID agent. The questions started sharp and relentless. Who is Apex Global Logistics to you? Why would a company on a federal watch list be sending a package to this base addressed to you? Are you in any kind of debt or trouble we need to know about? I tried to explain the twisted family dynamic, the sibling rivalry, the psychological games Ethan played. As I spoke, I could hear how pathetic it sounded. I was a soldier in the U.S. Army, describing my rich brother's bullying to a federal agent. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread across my neck and face. They listened patiently, their expressions unreadable, which was somehow even worse. The agent finally asked the question that cut the deepest. So you're telling us your brother, a successful businessman, would knowingly use a shell corporation associated with illicit activities just to play a prank on you for your birthday? The way he phrased it made it sound insane, unbelievable, and for a second I almost doubted it myself. Could Ethan really be that hateful, that destructive? But then I remembered the smirk on his face as our mother unwrapped that Rolex, the casual way he dismissed my life's work. Yes, he was exactly that hateful. He didn't just want to play a prank, I said, my voice quiet but steady. He wanted me to fail. He wanted to prove that his world is the only one that matters, and mine is a joke. After what felt like an eternity, they left me alone in the room again. The silence was a heavy blanket. I put my head in my hands, not out of despair, but out of a sudden, chilling clarity. All the years of feeling second best, of trying to earn an ounce of respect from my mother or brother, it was all a waste of time. They didn't see me as family. To them I was a rival, a disappointment, an inconvenient reminder of a path not taken. Ethan didn't just resent my choice. He was threatened by it. My service, my uniform, my brotherhood, it was a world of honor his money couldn't buy, and he couldn't stand it. This package wasn't just a gift. It was an act of war. A declaration that he would stop at nothing to see me broken. Hours later, the major returned. He looked tired. The EOD team checked the package. "It's clear," he said, his voice flat. They opened it. He slid a small, cheap object across the table. It was one of those plastic green army men you could buy in a bag for $5. Taped to its base was a tiny, neatly typed note. It had only 2 words, "Happy Birthday." The insult was so petty, so childish, it was almost comical. All of this, the MPs, the CID, the bomb squad, for a $2 toy. The sheer scale of his maliciousness was breathtaking. He had risked a federal investigation and my entire career, all to call me a toy soldier one more time. The major sat down across from me. "Your brother is a piece of work, Ryan," he said, not with anger, but with a kind of weary disgust. The shell company he used was flagged for some shady offshore dealings. He was either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant to think it wouldn't get noticed. He paused, looking me straight in the eye. "You're cleared of any wrongdoing. The report will state it was a malicious, non-credible threat originating from a civilian family member." I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me sick. But the relief was quickly replaced by something else, something cold and hard and clear. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done with him, done with my mother, done with their whole toxic world. The war was over because I was refusing to fight it any longer. The walk back to my barracks felt like a mile long. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a hollow, ringing silence in my ears. I sat on the edge of my bunk, the cheap plastic army man sitting on my nightstand like a little green tombstone. It wasn't relief I felt, not really. It was something colder, sharper. It was the feeling of a door slamming shut inside me, a door I didn't even know was still open. All those years, I had been waiting for some kind of approval, some sign that I mattered to them. And in a single calculated act of cruelty, Ethan had finally given me his answer. He didn't just want to hurt me. He wanted to erase me from the one place I had built for myself. The toy wasn't the insult. The real insult was the assumption that I was so weak, so desperate for their attention that I would just take it and keep coming back for more. My squad mates were good about it. No one asked questions. No one made jokes. When I walked into the mess hall that evening, Dave slid his tray over to make room for me, and another guy, Miller, pushed an extra brownie my way without saying a word. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It was a quiet acknowledgement that I was one of them, that my fight was their fight. In their silent support, I felt more of a family connection than I ever had sitting at that polished dining table in Dallas. They didn't need to know the details of my dysfunctional family. They just needed to know that one of their brothers had been targeted, and that was enough. They had my back. That simple, unspoken loyalty was something Ethan, with all his millions and his fancy cars, would never understand. He thought he was attacking a lone soldier. He had no idea he was messing with a whole platoon. The next day, Major Thompson called me into his office. He had a file on his desk. He motioned for me to sit down, his expression serious but not unkind. "Ryan," he started, his voice low and steady, "what your brother did was a calculated, malicious act. It was designed to cause maximum disruption to your career and this unit. He used a system he doesn't understand to attack a world he doesn't respect." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "True strength isn't about how hard you can hit, soldier. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Don't let this piece of scum define who you are." He then pushed a thin manila envelope across the desk toward me. "This is a copy of the official CID report. It's yours to keep, for your records." The weight of that simple envelope felt immense, a physical manifestation of the line that had just been drawn in the sand. I took the report back to my room and read it under the dim light of my desk lamp. The words were cold, bureaucratic, and utterly damning. Subject: malicious communication via U.S. mail. Sender: Apex Global Logistics, flagged entity. Intent: assessed as targeted harassment of a U.S. Army service member. Seeing Ethan's petty cruelty laid out in the sterile language of a federal investigation changed something fundamental in me. It wasn't a family drama anymore. It wasn't just my word against his. This was proof. This was an official document detailing an attempt to sabotage a soldier. The report didn't just clear my name. It validated every feeling of injustice I had ever suppressed. It turned his psychological warfare into a documented fact, a piece of evidence I could hold in my hand. It was no longer just my pain. It was a file, a case number, a truth that couldn't be denied or laughed away. A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was breezy and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Ryan, honey, how are you? Did you get that funny little birthday surprise from your brother? He is just terrible, isn't he?" She laughed, that light, tinkling sound that now felt like nails on a chalkboard. A funny little surprise. I stood there by the payphones in the rec hall, the receiver cold against my ear, listening as she described Ethan's latest business triumph. She was completely oblivious, not because she was stupid, but because she chose to be. She didn't want to see the darkness in her golden child. Admitting what he did would mean admitting the world she had built her life around was rotten at its core. Her willful ignorance was more insulting than Ethan's direct attack. It was the ultimate betrayal. She wasn't just a bystander. She was his accomplice, cleaning up his emotional messes and pretending the damage didn't exist. I didn't argue with her. I didn't scream or try to explain the MPs, the CID, the threat to my career. What was the point? It would have been like trying to describe the color blue to someone who has been blind from birth. I just said, "Yeah, I got it," my voice flat and empty. "Well, I hope you thought it was funny." "Ethan has such a unique sense of humor," she chirped. A unique sense of humor. That's what she called it. In that moment, the last thread of hope I had for our relationship just dissolved. I realized I had been mourning a mother I never really had. The woman on the other end of the line was a stranger, a woman so blinded by the gleam of a Rolex and the prestige of a Dallas mansion that she couldn't see her own son. I ended the call with a quiet, "I have to go," and hung up before she could say another word, feeling a profound and terrifying sense of freedom. My next leave was scheduled in 3 weeks. Before that phone call, I had planned on canceling it. I never wanted to set foot in that house again, but now a new plan was forming in my mind, a plan born not of anger but of a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't going back for a fight. Fights were for people who still had something to lose, who still cared about the outcome. I was going back to quit, to formally resign from the role of the family disappointment. I pulled the CID report from my footlocker and placed it carefully in the bottom of my duffel bag. I then went to my wall locker and took out my Class A dress uniform. I laid it on my bunk, the dark green fabric and polished brass looking stark against the simple Army-issue blanket. I was going to face them one last time, not as their son or brother, but as Sergeant Ryan Thompson, United States Army. The weeks leading up to my leave were different. I wasn't just going through the motions of training anymore. I was preparing for a mission. I pushed myself harder on the obstacle course, my muscles burning with a purpose that had nothing to do with combat readiness. I spent hours at the range, the rhythmic crack of the rifle focusing my mind until all the emotional noise faded away. I wasn't trying to distract myself. I was forging armor. Every drop of sweat, every strained muscle was a reminder of what I had built for myself away from them. This life, this uniform, this brotherhood, this was real. The world of their sprawling home, with its empty rooms and hollow laughter, was the fantasy. I was no longer the boy who craved their approval. I was the man who was coming to deliver a final verdict. As I packed my bags the night before my flight, a memory I hadn't thought of in years came bubbling to the surface. I was about 10, and I had proudly shown my father's old dog tags to Ethan. I loved them, the way they felt cool and heavy in my hand. Ethan had snatched them from me, sneering, "These are for losers who couldn't get a real job." He dangled them over a storm drain until I started to cry, only giving them back when our mother came outside and told him to stop teasing me. She never punished him. She just told me to be tougher and not let him get to me. I realize now that this wasn't a one-time incident. It was the blueprint for our entire lives. He dangled what mattered to me over a metaphorical drain, and she told me to be tougher. It was never about a joke. It was always about control, about showing me that he had the power to take away anything I valued. Boarding the plane to Dallas, I felt no anxiety, no dread. There was only a quiet, unshakable calm. I had my uniform perfectly pressed in my garment bag. I had the CID report tucked into my carry-on. These weren't props for a dramatic scene. They were my terms of surrender. But I wasn't the one surrendering. I was going to their home, their territory, a place built on money and status and emotional manipulation, and I was going to show them that none of it had any power over me anymore. The battle wasn't about to begin. It was already over. I had won the moment I realized my worth wasn't determined by their validation. This trip wasn't about confrontation. It was a formality. It was about closing a chapter of my life so I could finally, truly move forward. I looked out the window as the plane ascended, leaving North Carolina behind, feeling like I was flying toward an execution, but it wasn't mine. It was theirs. When the taxi pulled up to the curb, the sheer scale of the house hit me differently this time. It wasn't just big. It was obscene. A sprawling limestone fortress in a neighborhood where every lawn was perfectly manicured, and every car in the driveway was a German luxury brand. I paid the driver and walked up the long, winding stone path, my duffel bag slung over one shoulder, the garment bag with my uniform in my other hand. It felt less like coming home and more like approaching an embassy in a foreign country, a place where I didn't speak the language and wasn't a citizen. The air was still and quiet, filled with the scent of money and chlorine from a neighbor's pool. I rang the bell and the heavy oak door swung open, revealing my mother, her face a mask of practiced polite surprise, as if she hadn't known the exact minute my flight was landing. Her hug was brief and airy, smelling of expensive perfume and hairspray. "Ryan, you're here! You look thin. Are they feeding you?" It was her standard opening line, the one that managed to be both a greeting and a subtle critique. She led me into the cavernous foyer, its marble floors echoing with our footsteps. The house was immaculate, sterile like a magazine photo shoot. There was no clutter, no sign of life, just strategically placed art and furniture that probably cost more than my entire enlistment bonus. Ethan was nowhere in sight, but his presence was everywhere. In the abstract painting he'd bought at a charity auction, in the keys to his new Mercedes sitting in a crystal bowl by the door. My mother chattered away about a fundraiser she was planning, her voice a constant, bright hum that did nothing to fill the emptiness of the space around us. I found Ethan in his home office, a room that looked like it had been lifted from the set of a movie about a ruthless CEO. He was on the phone, one hand gesturing impatiently as he paced in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the pool. He saw me in the doorway, gave a curt nod and turned his back, raising his voice slightly. "No, $1,500,000 is the floor. We don't even entertain the conversation for less. Make it happen." He was performing, putting on a show of power for my benefit. When he finally hung up, he turned to me with a lazy smirk. "Look what the cat dragged in," he said, his eyes raking over my simple civilian clothes with disdain. "Good to see the army lets you out of the sandbox once in a while. Don't track any dirt on the rugs." There was no hello, no how are you, just an immediate reassertion of his dominance, his ownership of this world, and my otherness within it. That first dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. It was just the three of us at a dining table that could comfortably seat 12. My mother served a roast chicken she'd clearly had catered, talking non-stop about Ethan's upcoming business trip to Singapore. Ethan, for his part, directed a steady stream of condescending questions at me. "So what's the big plan, little brother? You going to make a career out of jumping out of planes, or are you going to get a real job eventually?" I just ate my food, giving short, non-committal answers. I like what I do. My silence seemed to infuriate him more than any argument could have. He wanted a fight, a reaction, something to prove he still had power over me. I refused to give it to him. I just sat there an observer, watching the two of them perform their well-rehearsed play, feeling more disconnected from them than ever before. After dinner, I went up to my old room. It was exactly as I'd left it years ago, a time capsule of a person I no longer was. Posters of bands I didn't listen to anymore, a shelf of books I'd never read again. It felt like visiting a stranger's grave. I carefully hung my garment bag in the closet, the crisp lines of my uniform a stark contrast to the teenage mess frozen in time. Then I took the manila envelope containing the CID report and slipped it into the drawer of my nightstand. It lay there, hidden but potent, a silent bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. I ran my hand over the smooth paper, the official government seal a small hard bump under my fingertips. This piece of paper was my declaration of independence. I wasn't here to plead my case or demand an apology. I was here to deliver a final, unappealable judgment. The next morning, my mother announced her plan with a bright, false cheerfulness. "We're having a special dinner tonight, just a few close family friends, to celebrate you being home." I knew immediately it wasn't a celebration for me. It was a command performance, an opportunity for her to show off her successful son, Ethan, and for Ethan to have an audience while he put his failure of a brother in his place. It was perfect. A public stage was exactly what I needed. I looked her right in the eye and said, "That sounds nice. I'll be there." My calm acceptance seemed to throw her off. She expected me to be difficult, to complain about being paraded around. My easy agreement was a move she hadn't anticipated, and for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, before the hostess smile snapped back into place. Throughout the day, Ethan escalated his campaign of subtle digs. He left a financial magazine open on the coffee table, the cover blaring 30 under 30, the new tech millionaires, with a picture of someone who looked just like him. While I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, he walked in talking loudly on his phone about the final specs for his new Porsche 911 Turbo S, making sure to mention the price tag. Every action was a carefully calibrated attempt to make me feel small, to remind me of the vast gulf between our worlds. He was a shark circling in the water, sensing blood, but he couldn't understand why I wasn't bleeding. My lack of reaction was my shield. He was firing arrows at a ghost, and the frustration was starting to show around the edges of his smug composure. That afternoon, while they were out, I began my own preparations. I took my dress uniform from the bag and laid it out on the bed. The dark green jacket, the perfectly creased trousers, the gleaming brass buttons. I took out my polishing kit and went to work on my shoes and the brass on my belt buckle, the familiar rhythmic motions calming my mind. This wasn't just a uniform. It was a testament to everything I had earned. Every stripe on the sleeve, every pin on the chest, was a story of sweat, discipline, and commitment. It was a currency of honor that made Ethan's millions look cheap and flimsy. As I worked, the house was silent and I felt a sense of ownership over the moment. I wasn't the intruder in their world anymore. Tonight they were going to be visitors in mine. As I carefully put on the uniform piece by piece, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror on the closet door. I didn't see the kid who used to live in this room. I saw a soldier. The fit was perfect, the lines sharp and defined. It was an armor of self-respect I had forged for myself, far away from this house and its suffocating expectations. I thought about the cheap plastic army man Ethan had sent me, his ultimate insult. He saw me as a toy, a plaything. He was about to find out that this toy had grown up, and he wasn't playing games anymore. This uniform wasn't a costume. It was the truth of who I was, and tonight, for the first and last time, I was going to wear that truth in their house. I was done hiding it, done apologizing for it, done letting them diminish it. With the CID report tucked securely in the inside pocket of my jacket, I walked out of my room and stood at the top of the grand staircase. Below I could hear the murmur of arriving guests, the clinking of glasses, and my mother's high social laugh. Ethan's voice cut through the noise, loud and self-assured, telling some story that was undoubtedly meant to impress everyone. I could smell the rich aroma of the catered food, a scent I now associated with performance and deceit. I took one last deep breath, the wool of the uniform feeling solid and reassuring against my skin. The stage was set. The audience had arrived. It was time to walk down those stairs and bring the curtain down on this entire charade, once and for all. The silence that was about to fall on that room would be more profound than any sound I had ever heard. I walked down the stairs, one slow, deliberate step at a time. The conversations below faltered, and then died completely as heads turned. The room was filled with my mother's friends, wealthy, polished people in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. And then there was me, a soldier in a sea of civilian luxury. My mother's face froze in a tight, horrified smile. She looked at my uniform like it was a stain on her pristine white carpet. Ethan, holding a glass of scotch, just stared, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Annoyance. Surprise? Crossing his face before the familiar, condescending smirk slid back into place. He saw a costume. He had no idea he was looking at the man who was about to end his world. The silence in that room was heavier than any physical weight I had ever carried, a thick, suffocating blanket of judgment and confusion. Dinner was an exercise in extreme tension. I was seated between the wife of one of Ethan's business partners and an older man who kept glancing at the service ribbons on my chest, as if trying to solve a puzzle. My mother chattered nervously, her voice an octave too high, desperately trying to steer the conversation towards safe topics like the stock market and a recent charity auction. Ethan, however, had no interest in safety. He started his assault subtly, with a toast, "To those who make a real impact in the world," his eyes locked on a tech investor across the table. He then turned to me, his voice dripping with false concern. "Must be nice to wear a fancy suit like that, Ryan. Do you get to play dress-up often or just for special occasions?" The table chuckled politely, and I just took a slow sip of water, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. My silence was a weapon he didn't know how to fight. He was used to me getting defensive, to arguing, to showing that his words had found their mark. But I just sat there, a calm island in the middle of his carefully orchestrated storm. I ate my food, listened to the vapid conversations around me, and felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. I could see the frustration building in his eyes. He needed to prove he was in control, especially in front of this audience, his court of admirers. He kept poking, making comments about my government paycheck, and asking if I'd ever seen a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly rent. Each jab landed in empty space. The other guests started shifting uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that this was more than sibling rivalry. It was something uglier, and my refusal to engage was making it painfully obvious. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pushed his chair back slightly, drawing the full attention of the table. He raised his glass, a smug, triumphant look on his face. "Well, since we're all here celebrating Ryan's visit," he began, his voice booming with arrogance, "I have to ask, how did you enjoy that little birthday present I sent you, little brother?" He paused for effect, letting the question hang in the air. "Just a little something to remind you of your place in the world. A little toy for the toy soldier." He smirked, looking around the table, waiting for the wave of laughter that would seal his victory and my humiliation. A few people chuckled nervously, but most just stared, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths. The air crackled with anticipation. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. A profound silence fell over the dining room. Every eye was on me. I could feel their collective gaze, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and morbid fascination. I slowly, deliberately placed my knife and fork down on my plate, the silver making a soft clink against the porcelain. I didn't look angry. I didn't look hurt. I looked directly at Ethan, holding his gaze across the expanse of polished wood and crystal glasses. I let the silence stretch, letting him and everyone else in that room feel the weight of what he had just admitted so publicly. His smirk began to falter slightly, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He had expected a wounded animal, but he was facing a hunter. I let him stew in that silence for a full 10 seconds. An eternity in a room that loud before I finally decided to speak. My voice, when it came, was calm and clear, cutting through the stillness with surgical precision. "You mean the package you sent from Apex Global Logistics?" I asked, my tone conversational. I saw a flash of genuine shock on his face. He hadn't expected me to know the name of his shell company. "Yes, I got it," I continued, my eyes never leaving his. It was quite the gift. So memorable, in fact, that the United States Army Criminal Investigation Division decided to write a full report on it. I slowly reached into the inside pocket of my uniform jacket. The rustle of the paper was the only sound in the room. Every person at that table leaned forward slightly, their breath held. My mother's face had gone from a tight smile to a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. She knew on some primal level that the world she had so carefully constructed was about to be shattered. I pulled out the thin manila envelope and laid it on the table. The official seal of the Department of the Army was stark and serious against the white linen tablecloth. I gave it a gentle push, and it slid across the polished surface, stopping directly in front of Ethan's plate. "This is for you," I said, my voice still quiet, still controlled. "It's a copy of the official report. It details how you knowingly used a shell corporation flagged on a federal watch list for illicit activities to send a package to a secure military installation. The official assessment was targeted harassment of a U.S. service member with intent to cause professional harm. They don't call that a prank, Ethan. They call it a federal offense." The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last, sinking into the dead silence of the room. The color drained from Ethan's face. His arrogant mask crumbled, replaced by a look of pure, slack-jawed disbelief. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't touch it. The guests were now murmuring openly, their shocked whispers filling the void. One of his business partners was staring at him with a new, calculating expression. My mother finally found her voice a high, panicked squeak. "Ryan, stop this! This is a family matter. You are embarrassing us in front of our friends." She tried to laugh it off, a brittle, desperate sound. "He's just joking, everyone." My sons have such a dark sense of humor, but no one was laughing. They were all looking at Ethan, then at the official government envelope, then back at Ethan, the pieces clicking into place. The golden boy was not just an arrogant jerk. He was something far more dangerous. I finally broke my gaze from Ethan and turned to my mother. The pity I once felt for her was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "A joke?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "He tried to destroy my career, my life. The one thing I have ever built for myself. And you call it a joke?" I looked back at my brother, whose eyes were now wide with a dawning horror. "This isn't a family matter anymore. This is a resignation. I'm officially resigning from my role as your punching bag and as your son." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "I am done with you, Ethan, and I am done with anyone who enables you, protects you, and pretends your cruelty is just a sense of humor." The finality in my voice was absolute. There was no room for negotiation, no hope for reconciliation. It was an amputation. With that, I stood up from the table. I smoothed the front of my jacket, the gesture calm and final. The uniform felt less like an armor now and more like my own skin. It was who I was, and I was finally standing fully within it. The people at the table just stared, their expensive dinner forgotten, their faces a gallery of shock and disbelief. I looked around at them, these so-called friends who had laughed at Ethan's jokes at my expense just minutes before. "My apologies for interrupting your meal," I said, my voice formal, distant. I gave a slight formal nod, not of respect, but of dismissal. I was no longer a part of their world, and the relief was so profound it felt like I could float. I had taken their stage and rewritten the ending to their play. Without another word, I turned my back on all of them, on my stunned brother, my weeping mother, their horrified guests, and the entire empty, gilded cage of a life they represented. I walked out of the dining room, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor of the foyer. I didn't rush. My pace was steady, measured, the walk of a man who knew exactly where he was going. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the silence behind me, a vacuum where a family used to be. I reached the heavy front door, turned the brass handle, and stepped out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut behind me, a soft, definitive sound that was the sweetest I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. It was the sound of my life finally beginning. I didn't go to the airport. I walked out of that gated community, past the manicured lawns and silent, imposing houses, and kept walking until the streetlights seemed a little less judgmental. I called a cab and went to a cheap anonymous hotel off the highway, the kind with thin walls and the faint smell of bleach. I didn't even go back for my duffel bag. The thought of stepping foot in that house again was unbearable. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, still in my dress uniform, and felt the silence. It wasn't the triumphant silence of a victor, but the hollow, ringing silence of a building that has just been demolished. There was nothing left but dust and open air. The weight was gone, but its absence left me feeling strangely light, untethered. I had won, but I had also lost a brother and mother I realized I never truly had in the first place. Back at the mansion, the dinner party imploded. I heard about it weeks later from a distant aunt who called, her voice a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The guests, particularly Ethan's business partners, had offered flimsy, awkward excuses and fled within minutes of my departure. The sight of a federal document on the dinner table was a kind of social poison they couldn't get away from fast enough. The story spread through their exclusive circle like a virus. It wasn't just about a family feud. It was about a successful CEO being reckless enough to get himself on the radar of a criminal investigation division. In their world, where image and stability were everything, Ethan was suddenly a liability. He wasn't just cruel, he was sloppy. And in the high-stakes game he played, sloppy was unforgivable. His carefully curated reputation had been shattered in a single evening. My mother's reaction was predictable. She didn't call me. She didn't try to broker peace. Her anger, my aunt explained, was volcanic. She was furious with Ethan for his arrogance and stupidity, for bringing this shame upon their house. But she was just as furious with me for exposing it. In her eyes, I had committed the ultimate sin. I had aired the family's dirty laundry in public, sacrificing their social standing for my own selfish pride. The perfect world she had built around her golden son was now tainted. The phone calls from her friends became less frequent. The invitations to galas and fundraisers dwindled. She had hitched her entire identity to Ethan's success, and I had just shown everyone that the foundation of that success was rotten with a petty, dangerous cruelty. She was trapped in the wreckage with him, and she would never forgive me for it. The next morning, from that sterile hotel room, I called Major Thompson. I kept it brief, professional. "Sir, the personal matter in Dallas has been resolved. I won't be returning to that address." There was a pause on the line, then his steady voice came back, devoid of judgment. "Understood, Sergeant. Update your records with us when you can. We'll see you back on base." That simple, unquestioning acceptance was everything. I booked the first flight back to North Carolina. Stepping off the plane at Fayetteville felt more like coming home than my actual arrival in Dallas ever had. I was returning to a world of logic, order, and earned respect. I had walked out of a war zone of my own making and was returning to the one place on earth where I knew exactly who I was and where I stood. The relief was a physical thing, a loosening in my chest I hadn't realized was there. About a month later, a certified letter arrived for me at the base. It was from a high-powered Dallas law firm. Inside was a stack of legal documents, thick and imposing, filled with jargon I barely understood. The gist of it was simple. My mother was formally disowning me. I was being written out of her will, scrubbed from all legal and financial ties to the family. Tucked inside was a single sheet of her expensive cream-colored stationery with a short, typed note. "You have made it clear you no longer wish to be a part of this family. We are granting your wish." There was no signature. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of erasure. I looked at the papers, at the cold final words, and felt nothing but a profound sense of peace. She hadn't cut me off. She had finally officially set me free. I signed the documents and mailed them back the same day. The consequences for Ethan were concrete and lasting. The business partner who had been at the dinner, a man with deep connections in the tech industry, quietly pulled out of a multi-million-dollar merger they had been planning for months. The official reason was market volatility, but the real reason echoed through the Dallas business community. Ethan was seen as unstable, a man who would risk a federal investigation over a sibling rivalry. His judgment was questioned. He didn't go to jail. He wasn't charged with a crime, but in his world the punishment was just as severe. He lost credibility. He lost momentum. The aura of the untouchable golden boy was gone, replaced by the stench of scandal and poor judgment. He had tried to burn down my world and had ended up setting his own on fire. 2 years passed. I made Sergeant First Class. I re-enlisted for another 6 years. The Army was my life, my home, my family. The men in my unit knew a vague version of the story, but the details didn't matter to them. What mattered was that I was reliable, that I had their backs, that I was a good leader. My life was measured in successful training exercises, in the respect of my soldiers, in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. I never heard from my mother or brother again. I didn't exist to them, and they, in turn, became like characters in a book I had read a long time ago. The pain was still there, a faint scar deep inside, but it no longer ached. It was just a part of my history, a reminder of the price of freedom. I saw him one last time purely by chance. I was on leave, visiting a friend in Austin. We were walking downtown when I saw a familiar figure getting into a car across the street. It was Ethan. He looked different, thinner, with a tension around his eyes that hadn't been there before. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a kind of weary frustration. He was driving a standard sedan, not the flashy sports car he always favored. Our eyes met for a split second through the flow of traffic. For a moment there was no recognition, just a blank stare. Then I saw it, a flicker of shock, of shame, of a deep corrosive anger. He looked away first. I didn't smile or gloat. I just felt a quiet final click inside me. I turned to my friend and kept walking, not even looking back. There was nothing left to see. Back at Fort Liberty, I stood on the parade ground at dusk, watching the flag being lowered. The familiar notes of the bugle echoed across the base, a sound that had become the rhythm of my life. I didn't get a dramatic apology. I didn't get a courtroom victory. What I got was better. I got peace. I got a life built on a foundation of my own choosing, surrounded by people who valued me for my character, not my connections. Ethan had sent me a toy soldier to tell me what he thought I was worth. But he was the one who was the toy, a plaything of his own ego and insecurity. I wasn't a toy. I was a soldier. I had faced my enemy. I had held my ground and I had walked away from the battle, leaving the casualties behind me. The war was finally over. If you know someone who needs to hear this message of self-confidence, please share this video with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your own path, even when it's not what others expect. Thank you for listening. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about value. For years, I let my family define my worth. They put a price tag on everything. Success was a number in a bank account. Love was a gift wrapped in a designer box. And respect was measured in square footage. I spent so much of my life trying to prove I was valuable in their currency, a language I was never meant to speak. The truth is, your value is not determined by someone else's ledger. It's forged in your own choices, in your integrity, and in the quiet pride you take in the person you are when no one is watching. You have to be the one to set your own price, and you have to set it so high that no amount of their money or their judgment can ever afford it. I also learned what family really means. It's a word we throw around a lot, assuming it's defined by blood and shared last names. But that's not it. Family isn't about obligation. It's about loyalty. It's about who shows up for you when the world tries to tear you down. My squad mates, with a simple, unspoken gesture of sliding a brownie my way, showed me more family than I had ever known in that cold, marble-floored mansion. True family are the people who see your strength when you feel weak, who respect your path even if they don't understand it, and who have your back without needing a reason. If you're surrounded by people who claim to be your family but only make you feel small, you have every right to go out and find a new one. The family you choose is often the one that saves you. Perhaps the most powerful lesson was that walking away is not an act of failure. It's a declaration of self-worth. We're often taught to fight for relationships, to endure, to turn the other cheek, but sometimes the battlefield is so toxic that the only way to win is to refuse to fight. Walking out of that house, leaving everything behind, wasn't me surrendering to them. It was me surrendering the idea that I needed them to be whole. It was a strategic retreat to a life of peace. If you find yourself in a constant war where your soul is the casualty, remember that your peace is more valuable than their victory. Laying down your arms and walking toward your own horizon is the bravest move you can ever make. It's not giving up. It's taking back control. And in that final confrontation, I discovered the immense power of calm. My brother wanted a reaction. He fed on anger, on hurt, on drama. It was the fuel for his ego. When I refused to give it to him, when I met his loud, arrogant cruelty with quiet, unshakable facts, he imploded. He didn't know how to fight an enemy who wouldn't raise his voice. Your emotional energy is a precious resource. Don't waste it on people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence, your composure, your refusal to be dragged down to their level, that is your power. It communicates that you are no longer a participant in their chaos. You're just an observer who has decided to leave the theater. Many people might ask if I ever forgave them. The answer is complicated. I don't carry hatred for them anymore, because hatred is a heavy burden. But forgiveness for me wasn't about absolving them. It was about accepting the truth of who they were and releasing myself from the hope that they would ever be different. I forgave the younger version of myself for believing their lies, for thinking I was the problem. That's the most important forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself for seeking water from a dry well. Once you accept that some people are incapable of giving you the love and respect you deserve, you stop being thirsty. You learn to find your own water, and you finally set yourself free. Ultimately, this whole experience taught me the difference between being rich and having wealth. Ethan had wealth. He had the cars, the house, the stocks, the Rolex, but he was one of the poorest people I've ever known. Poor in character, in empathy, in honor. I learned that true richness is having a life you are proud to lead. It's about having integrity that can't be bought, a purpose that gives you meaning, and relationships built on mutual respect. The uniform I wore that night wasn't just clothing. It was a symbol of a different kind of wealth, one that is earned through sweat and sacrifice, not inheritance or luck. Don't let the world trick you into chasing the wrong kind of riches. Build a life that's rich in honor, and you will never feel poor a day in your life. If my story taught you anything, I hope it's that you are the author of your own life. You get to decide who the main characters are, and you have every right to write toxic people out of your script. Your path is yours alone to walk, and its value is not determined by the approval of the people you leave behind. If you know someone who is struggling to find the courage to choose their own path, please share this with them. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the face of adversity. Thank you for letting me share my story with you.